Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. And, one of the most important things in interviewing and talking to entrepreneurs and hearing their stories is entrepreneurship and the law, because we all work in a very regulated society and we need to understand the rules and the regulations behind the law. That's why we talk every week with currently my co-host, Marc Z from Marc Z Legal Staffing. Welcome back, Marc.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to be here, as always.
Thank you very much. And as my co-host, we'd like to introduce Daniel Batterman, attorney at
Lipresti Law.
Lipresti Law. Okay, I got it. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Why don't you tell us about your practice?
So I'm in the technology, internet, and intellectual property law space. I've been doing that for almost 30 years now, since the mid-1990s. When I started back then, which was a bit of the Wild West, it encompassed a lot of trademark and copyright and contract and some privacy. Since then, since the internet has become such a commercial force, I still do all of those areas, but it's expanded to things like licensing, online defamation, certainly more privacy issues, software development, and of course, these days, there's a lot of talk about AI, NFTs, and so forth.
You triggered me on one thing. I don't know if Marc wants to go there. Online defamation, something we probably wouldn't have thought about just a few years ago.
Right. No, it was interesting. I had talked to Dan a few times because what's interesting is in a lot of cases, and it's not illegal to do, but a lot of times employers will Google will research candidates on the internet before they meet them or during the hiring process. And they'll get certain information, and a lot of information that they'll receive, it's unfortunate, or people don't know the whole story. So, for example, I remember one time that we had a really sharp attorney that we were working with, and the attorney, they Googled him and they found that he was arrested for assault and battery. And immediately something comes to mind. Oh my goodness, he's assault and battery, but he's active member of the bar. When you researched it further, if you talk to him about it, but people don't necessarily do that, talk to him about it, you find out he was at a wedding and a fight broke out, and he had to hold back somebody to break up the fight. But when the police arrived, he was holding somebody down. So the reporter captured this, that amongst other people, that he was arrested, and it was dismissed probably the following week. But unfortunately, that carried on. And that's one example. I'm sure Dan can talk about numerous examples where it's very serious stuff.
Yeah, it's become a growing part of my practice. I was very fortunate in the early 90s. I clerked for one of the best defamation lawyers in America back in Philadelphia. And he handled some very high-end cases involving newspapers and so forth. The internet hadn't really caught on at that point. And I would help him with those cases and doing the research. And I really found it to be fascinating stuff. But then it really went quiet for quite a while. I came out of law school. I didn't do that type of work. But then with the advent of Yelp and Google reviews and the proliferation of social media, it's become a bigger part of my practice, simply because everybody's online and everybody's saying something about everyone else. And of course, Google ranks it and presents it. And I get calls at least a couple of times a month involving online reviews of businesses, of services, what have you, where somebody says something that that can be very damaging, something that's untrue, actually, or something that certainly has been given a spin to make it seem like it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge today, and anything that's put forward on the internet is for public viewing. So it's not something that can be regulated. Unlike, say, you can only do query checks back 7 years, or they're trying to help people. So it really does affect people's prospects. But so how do you go about, if you could share some of your thoughts handling some of these difficult situations?
Well, in some instances, I tell clients that, if you want to pursue legal action, which I'm happy to do, you can make the situation worse. The so-called Streisand effect, where suddenly something that doesn't get a lot of play or a lot of attention, you then sue over it, and that ends up drawing a lot of attention to it. Sometimes you have no choice. I've had clients who've been called pedophiles online, and some really damaging things, versus people who are just expressing really strong opinions. I try to deal with it internally sometimes, in the sense that you try to contact Google or Yelp and you see if these reviews are consistent with their policies. Sometimes they are, many times they are, but sometimes they're not. And the provider will step in without having to initiate any legal action, not against the provider, because that'll never go anywhere, but against the individual who left it. And sometimes it works. Going down the litigation road, as I'm sure you know, Marc, because you're in the business, is long and is expensive and not always effective, because in those situations, you're not always seeking damages. What a lot of times my clients want is simply they want the defamatory review material removed. They want a court order asking that it be removed, which isn't always successful. Some courts will grant them, some courts won't. And some providers won't necessarily honor those orders either, believe it or not. So it's a very sticky situation. I often tell clients they may also want to retain a PR consultant to help generate some positive content that may push that negative content down or not give it as much prominence.
Right, right.
But it's only getting worse. I mean, Twitter certainly didn't make the problem any easier, and I think to some extent we may need some new laws or some new procedures for addressing it, because it is so prevalent and potentially so damaging.
Very interesting you mentioned, and I had never heard it before. I wrote it down, the Streisand effect. And I don't know if it's part of the legal vernacular, and I'm not an attorney, but I do come out of one of the country's or the world's leading marketing firms. And I've many times told clients, don't hire a PR firm. Let it just go away quickly and quietly. And because the press prefers negative stories versus positive stories. And even if you call with a positive story, they're going to try to look for the other side, even though you're not presenting the other side. So I think it's very important that you get the right marketing advice and know when not to, that the client needs to lead the marketing, not the marketing lead the client.
No, absolutely, Jeff. And I had a potential client. I kind of dissuaded him a few years ago, who was on one of these TV reality shows, one of these doctors, and who was being defamed online by somebody he had operated on, whose surgery did not go well because, as the doctor disclosed to me, but obviously couldn't say this online, the person was a drug user, had used prior to surgery, and didn't heal properly. But of course, as he's being defamed online, he can't say this, because then he violates confidentiality. I mean, doctors, lawyers, and others have this problem. So I said, really, the best thing to do, given his prominence, I said, is just to let it go away. Because if I file a lawsuit, if I send a cease and desist letter, he's just going to take that, post it online, make the situation worse. So sometimes, given the fact that people only have a very short attention span these days, it's better to sometimes not do anything. Again, it really depends. It really depends.
Well, again, you're not going to meet a marketing firm that isn't going to say, I can't help you. And a lot of people like to make attorney jokes, but, marketers need business too. So, right. When you're put in a position that you have to hire an attorney, there is no choice. You have to have that attorney, and when you have to do that, but be very careful with your marketing arm and how you use it. And again, I've seen many situations where saying nothing meant it went away right away.
Right. And in the example I just gave you, I mean, he ended up not retaining me because I said, look, this is what I can do legally, but I'm not sure that helps you, given the fact that he was on TV and that he was pretty active. So, you have to proceed carefully in those types of cases.
Well, I find the whole subject of everything you do quite extensive, and we could not cover it, in one interview. So we hope you come back again, and you have to bring Marc Z with you for protection. That's your legal protection. You have Marc Z.
Absolutely.
But Daniel, before you come back again, if someone wants to understand these issues, and this is, as a management consultant, I'm telling you, this is an important issue you brought up, the first one. How do they find you?
Well, I currently I'm an attorney over at Lipresti Law, which you can find online at our website. Certainly, I can be reached via email. I also have my own website, battermanlaw.com, although that's a bit of a work in progress. But I'm pretty easy to find these days. And people can reach out to me certainly on the online defamation, but on a host of other issues as well. Intellectual property is a big part of my practice. Trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and many other areas as well.
Oh, we know you're going to be back again. Marc Z, how do we find you?
Well, Google Marc Z, M-A-R-C, and the letter Z. Go on the wonderful Radio Entrepreneurs website. Go to marczlegal.com, MARCZLEGAL.com at 617-338-1300.
Great. And
Jeff, I was going to say is Dan had some really great insight, I thought, on online defamation, which really is getting worse and worse. So thank you very much.
People are slamming people every day, and you got to stay away from that. I've had friends, good friends, and I tell them, don't do that. You don't want to be doing that. Someone's watching who you don't want to be watching you. So remind everybody, this is Radio Entrepreneurs.